Is it just me, or have we heard a lot about Matthew McConaughey recently around gun control, gun responsibility, gun blah, 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 and running for office? Well, he's at it again, this time on ABC News, but he says some things that are going to make some lefties real unhappy, and at the same time, probably not make any friends on the gun right side either. Everything's going to be linked in the description box below as we break this down because this is, at very least, interesting. Now, as we go forward, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn the notification bell on. We are within 500 of 500,000 subscribers, and anything that you guys can do to help us get over that mark, I would deeply appreciate it. Jump on the train, and we'd love to have you. All right, my brothers and sisters, this is an interesting one. Let me just get into this because we've covered Matthew McConaughey a lot recently. Uvalde native Matthew McConaughey on finding real gun violence solutions and whether he'd run for office. That happened today. This article came out today. Again, it was on ABC News. So when you see as much media saturation as we've seen over the past few days, you wonder what's going on. Well, let me read a few of these quotes here, and then I'll tell you if you think, or you can tell me in the comments field if you think you're going to hear from him a lot more, because he may have just made some people angry. Check this out. But while the bipartisan Senate Safer Communities Act is already working in some ways, there are also billions of dollars that are left to be unspent or to be spent, McConaughey said. Billions of dollars for school safety. Great. That's awesome, McConaughey said. And then you find out 1 year later that the money hasn't gone out yet, most of it. So that's kind of going towards his green initiative, or his initiative for helping schools basically apply for granting, and that's the entire thing, the Green Light Initiative. So in this interview, the ABC News interviewer, or the co-host, or the host, or the interview, whatever you want to call him in this context, he's basically advocating that gun control is the way to go, and there's billions of dollars. So he's kind of like, there's this like little conflict in the actual interview, but anyway, let's keep going, because you're going to hear this a bunch. What are we doing, McConaughey said, adding, quote, that's a 0% success rate. One way, too few applications. Number two, the 12 applications, we went 0 for 12. Quote, the government admits that it shouldn't be this complicated, he said. So then ABC tries to cover for the grants that have gone out. But that's the entire point. He's calling shade on the idea that you've got a success rate of 0 for 12. It's too complicated. There's money that's not spent for gun safety, as they call it. What are we doing? Which is ironic because Chris Murphy started this entire punch after this tragedy by saying, what are we doing on the Senate floor, which led to the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Just a little touch of irony there. Don't know if he meant to do it, but if he did, that was impressive. But let's keep going because this is the part where we get to possible consternation against McConaughey from the gun controllers. Quote, a lot of people that consider themselves Second Amendment supporters, they think any measure is a measure towards confiscating all guns. So how do you speak to those people, Carl asked. Yeah, I told you it's a setup. McConaughey said his solution starts simple. I'd change the word from gun control to gun responsibility, he said. Now, one more thing, and then we're going to hit on that really, really hard. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this interview. Check this out. Quote, no one wants to be controlled, he continued, but responsibility is still something that we can all go, yeah, I'll take responsibility. The Second Amendment defenders could talk responsibility. They could look you in the eye and talk responsibility with someone from the other side of the aisle. I'm going to pause this for a second. This is where he's going to lose the gun controllers. Because on the gun right side of the argument, yourself, where you're sitting in this, you already know the 4 basic rules of gun safety. You know the responsibilities that our rights are required. This isn't something new. So that's the one thing. This isn't new information to gun rights supporters on the right side of this issue. And I mean that in both ways. However, on the gun control side of the issue, you're taking away control. They want control. You're putting all the faith in someone's going to be responsible, and the government's not going to come in and mandate that responsibility. You will never get the gun controllers on board with that because it takes government out of the equation and puts the impetus on personal responsibility. If you go down the road of personal responsibility as the solution to problems, that undermines a lot of the centralized solutions that the left will offer you. That's why this will never work for the left. The right has already gone down that road without government mandating, without dictates. We already do this on an everyday basis because our rights are an incredible responsibility that we take very seriously. It's one of the reasons we fight so hard on it. But the left is not going to be down with this. Let's continue. Carl noted polling that shows broad support for further regulations, such as universal background checks and waiting periods for firearm purchases. Yet none of these things have been done. That's because they're unconstitutional, Mr. Carl. This is pretty simple. This is a gun control perspective wrapped up in an interview talking to someone who they're hoping to get star power to say gun control initiative talking points. But he's going against it. I don't think he's going at it from a perspective of he's an ultimate gun rights supporter. Don't get me twisted. But I also don't think he's going at it from a hardcore gun control perspective either. I think he's honestly going at it from a perspective of let's just talk about this. Now, again, I'm not a fan of what he's doing. I'm not a fan of how he behaved with the Senate Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. None of those things. We're still in the same camps on this one. But what's interesting is the way that the ABC interviewer is resisting what he's saying when he's approaching it from what he views as common sense. Not my common sense, his common sense. But that responsibility versus control piece is what it's boiled down to the entire time. You take control out of it, there's nothing in it for the left. And that's an important aspect. Now I got one more thing for you. Listen to this exchange. This is interesting stuff. McConaughey said he believes that the majority public view on the issue is not being represented by politicians right now. The math should add up, and right now it doesn't, he said. And this is where the interviewer comes in again. Do you have any advice to particularly Democrats on this issue? Not Republicans, right? Just Democrats. Do you have any advice on how they can speak, Carl asked. And so not about changing their behavior, about how they can wrap it up. It's important. Quote, there's a whole lot of Americans that you need you to at least meet them where they are and what they're understanding and how they've grown up on the issue with guns in their lives and how they, most of them, do handle them responsibly, McConaughey said. So don't cast them down as being archaic or cavemen. Oh, does that sting? That is exactly the opposite. The entire approach that the gun control movement has been built on. The Davy Hoggs, the Maxwell Frost, the Shannon Watts, the Moms Demand Action, Everytown for Gun Safety. Everything about the approach that they've taken is about ostracizing people who do not agree with them and painting them as murderers and responsible for criminal behavior. They cannot just do a 180 and say, well, let's talk gun responsibility because they have to have it be gun control. That's why they try so hard with this nice little soft, flowery language of common sense gun reforms, because they have to wrap it up in government control, not individual responsibility, because then you open a whole big individualistic streak, which they don't want to crack open. And that's what I've got for you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you on the next one. I'm Braden. See you later.